Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I am here today to do a tutorial of my take on an inside out spine, which is what I'm calling it for lack of a better term. I had a few people who commented on my kite journal video and they were interested in seeing how I did this. So I'm super excited to show you. Like I said in that video, and you can go back and watch that if you would like. I kind of came up with it by accident the first time I did it because I was trying to avoid covering up the front cover of a journal because I liked what was, what was on it. And that would be, like in my case, it was just an old book that I liked the cover of, but it might be a little golden book, or in the case of the kite journal, it was the Curious George book and it had too much on it and I would have cut off, like if you look at this one, I would have cut off too much of the picture. I don't have the Curious George book here with me now because I've already mailed it off to its new owner, but this journal was also created with the same spine. So I'll be using this to kind of show you as we go along what you are trying to achieve. Basically, before we get started here, if you look at the way that the spine is, it opens fully on that hinge and everything is inside as opposed to wrapped around the outside. Hopefully that makes sense. And I think it'll make more sense as we go along. And then you have pieces inside here. So you end up with a hidden spine and also this inside out kind of situation. So it lays really flat, I think, as opposed to sometimes, when you do the covering on the outside, it doesn't lay as flat. If you don't line things up quite properly. So this one does, and I like the way that happens. So let me put this aside. All right, so I did some prep work ahead of time because honestly, I have never really measured out when I'm doing this. I usually just kind of do it as I go along and guesstimate, but you do want to make sure of a couple things, and a couple measurements are quite important. So for demonstration purposes, these are going to be my covers. Okay, so we have, the width doesn't really matter, but we've got 8 7/8 inches tall on these, okay? And again, you can do this with any cover, any chipboard, anything that you're making your journal cover out of. It doesn't have to be these measurements, but I'm giving you the measurements of what I'm using so that you can kind of gauge your measurements as you go along, if that makes sense. So those are my covers. Now we're gonna base this on a 2-inch inner spine. So this is the piece that you will sew your signatures onto, okay? So that piece is 2 inches wide, okay? Now the outer spine, which is gonna be this outer part here, okay, needs to be a tad bigger in all directions than your inner spine, okay? Because you wanna leave space for that cover to open and close properly, all right? So your outer spine, I make all my measurements just 1/8 of an inch bigger all around, okay? Well, not all around. It's 1/8 of an inch taller and it's 1/8 of an inch wider, okay? Now both of these pieces are smaller in height than my cover, as you can see, okay? So this is 1/8 of an inch shorter and this is 1/8 of an inch shorter than this, okay? Do you see kind of the pattern we're going here? The reason that these are a bit shorter is because you're probably going to cover these with something and you might not be covering your covers. If you are covering your covers, you're gonna have to adjust your measurements a bit because once we put either cardstock or fabric around these, you'll see that the measurement, it will get a little bigger and a little wider just because you're adding that extra material onto them. So that's why I give a little extra space there. Okay, so then let's go ahead. Let me get my thoughts together here for a second. I went ahead and cut. Now, honestly, this is, I wish I had maybe been working on one to kind of show you a little better, but I'm not currently working on a journal of this type, and I wanted to get this out there because there were people that were interested. So just bear with me with my, you know, scraps of stuff that I'm using, but the gist is there. The basic idea should be easy to understand, and if it's not, please leave a comment and let me know, and I'll try to fix it and explain it a little better. So, all right, let's move everything off to the side so we can look at what we have. So we have our front and back cover, and for this demonstration, we're going to assume that we are not covering these pieces, okay? So we're gonna pretend like this is a vintage book that we really like the cover of, and we don't wanna cover it. Now, if you want later on to add something to the inside, you can. You can do it before if you want to be able to see your spine covering, or you can do it after, and that's completely up to you. This one I did before. I added this piece of green cardstock beforehand. If you go back and look at the Kite journal video, I added it after, so you can see how that looks differently. I apologize, that went in the mail yesterday and I just don't have it here to show you, but you can go back and look at the video and you'll be able to see exactly how I covered the inside later. Okay, but for these purposes, we're just going to assume that we like the covers, we like the insides, and we're not going to cover, you know, do anything to alter those, okay? So we're going to work with our outer spine first, okay? And like I said, we have 8 3/4 inches tall on this demonstration and 2 1/8 inches wide. So I made my cardstock piece that I want to cover this in, okay? And this is you're gonna want this to be a piece. It can be fabric, it can be cardstock, it could be wallpaper, it could be anything that you want to cover the spine with, but it's going to show, okay? In this journal, it's this gingham cardstock. So, you know, it'll be a piece that you want showing on the outside. And that kind of goes for all of it. It's all going to show in some capacity or another. So I made this piece an inch taller on all sides. So we've got 10 3/4 inches tall and 4 1/8 inches wide. That just gives us some space to cover the outside of this. So we're just going to, whoops, let's go do this first. I'm just going to use some double-sided tape for speed here. But I would probably, I would maybe use double-sided tape for this, but I might just do the double-sided tape on the outside and add either some art glitter glue, or if you like Fabri-Tac, to the inside just to kind of give it more stability. But just for these purposes, we're just going to use this. Grab my bone folder here. So I was super excited that people were interested in how I did this. I assumed that it had probably been done before, and maybe it still has. And I didn't realize that it was something that people would be interested in. So I'm super excited about that. Yeah, all right, so we are going to center this. I can cover that up as well as we can. It doesn't really matter. It's not that important, as long as you have a good overhang on all sides. All right, and then just burnish that down so it stays. Okay, and then we want to miter our corners, and I always do this by eye, just about, you know, a 1/16 or 1/8 of an inch. And honestly, this piece of cardstock probably doesn't need to be quite this, this big, but if you have scraps that you want to use and they at least, you know, give you space to miter the corners and all that good stuff, then that's good enough. All right, and then I always go around and just give these a good fold against the chipboard or whatever I'm using as my spine before I add any glue or anything, just so they're started and they're easier to fold then later. And again, for these purposes, we'll just use, and you're not going to see the inside of this. This is going to be hidden by the other spine. But you do want to make sure that there's at least enough coverage, you know, so that when this lays on top, you will see some border around all the edges. So just make sure that it covers at least that much. I hope everybody is doing well today. It is sunny here, finally. So that's much more pleasant than the weather we've been having. We've been having, it feels like a lot of rain, but I think I just noticed the rain more than I noticed the sun. So maybe it hasn't been quite that bad, but it has been, yeah, it is beautifully sunny today. I don't know what the temperature is outside because I have not left the house yet. But it looks nice, so I'll take it. Alrighty, there we go. So we will just make sure we pull that nice and tight. Make sure we have that all glued down. Again, for this, I would probably use score tape or double-sided tape on the outer edge, and then I would probably add some glue at the crease, just because I overdo it with my glue. But that's what I would normally do if I was actually making this for a journal, but that takes a lot longer to do. So we'll just burnish that down. I just wanted to give you the basics. Most of you who are interested in this know, you know, all the other little ins and outs. So this is our outer spine, and I'm going to mark that for myself. Outer spine, there we go. So we can set that aside, and we're gonna do the exact same thing with our inner spine. So let's put some score tape down here. And I will still be back later today with the beginning of my my series on using up my scraps, and it's going to be kind of a combination of using up my scraps and I haven't watched all of Artie Maze's, or well, Andrea's. Andrea from Artie Maze is doing a series on junk in the trunk. If you haven't seen it, it's really good. You can go check her out. But the only one I've watched so far is the one on packaging, which was the first one. And I have a lot of that too. And I was keeping it, and I was saving it and storing it. And I actually, right before I watched that video, I was thinking to myself, why am I keeping all of this? I don't use it that often. It's just taking up space, and I almost got rid of it. And I'm so glad I didn't, because she has some really good ideas for using that kind of stuff. So I'm going to incorporate a lot of my packaging into the series as well. So it'll be stuff from my scrap bins and miscellaneous packaging that I've been hoarding for a while. So yeah, and again, this piece doesn't need to really be this big, but it works. So only the outside of this is going to show. And this again is the piece that you will sew your signatures into. Alrighty, so we'll go around, crease all of that. And secure it down. So I'm very excited because my son and his girlfriend are coming up from Florida next week, and they'll be here for about a week, and I miss him so much, so I'm so excited to see him. He is going to school in Florida. He is, when he's finished, he'll have a degree in sports broadcasting, and I'm just so thrilled for him. We've been able to hear him broadcast one of the other local small colleges in Florida, one of their baseball games, and it was just so fun. And he did not get his love of sports from me. Let's just put it that way. I really don't, I really have no interest. I'll go to a baseball game, but not really for the game usually, but he has a passion for all things sports, any sport. It doesn't matter what it is. He watches women's lacrosse and like golf and things that, he loves it all. And, but when he did his broadcast, we were able to listen online, and it was so exciting. I listened to the whole thing. I think it went to like, I don't know, 13 innings or something. And I listened to the whole thing, and I could have listened to it forever. So yeah, anyway, but he's coming up, next week, he and his girlfriend, and I am very excited. All right, so we have our inner spine and our outer spine. So once we attach everything, they are going to go together like so. And actually, I was just thinking, you're not going to see any of this either because we have to put it together. So yeah, you're only going to see the pretty parts. All right, now let's get our front and back covers. And again, I don't measure this. I probably should. Now for this step, as you can see, I'm sorry if my head just got in that shot. I apologize. As you can see, now that we've put that paper, the cardstock, around that spine, it's a lot closer to the actual height of the covers. And if it's not exactly perfect, it doesn't matter, because this is the piece that we're going to use to attach everything together. And it is, it's just a piece of scrap. It is the correct measurement for the height of the covers. So it is 8 7/8 inches tall, just like the covers. And then I made it 4 inches wide, which gives us a little, some overhang, but you want to make sure, it might be, I scored this one at 7/8 and 3 1/8 inches. Okay, so you've got 2 1/4 on the inside. Sorry, let me step back a second because I'm probably not explaining this very well. Your 2 1/4 measurement comes from this piece. Okay, you want to make sure that when you score it, you are leaving just a tiny, tiny bit on each side of that spine. Can you see that there? It's really kind of hard to show you. Okay, do you see how you've got a little bit on each side? That's going to help it to, to fold properly. Now, this piece is just a scrap, but you would want to make sure that whatever you're using for this piece, be it fabric or cardstock, make sure you like what's on both sides, okay? Because this little piece, as you can see on this one, will show through. There is a crack when you close it. It will show through. Now, I did all kinds of like distressing to this, so you can't really tell, but that piece of gingham cardstock does show through that crack. Okay, if that makes sense. So you want to like both sides. So if you have double-sided cardstock, or if you're using fabric, make sure that it's like a fabric that doesn't look horrible on the wrong side, because it will show. I hope that makes sense. And if you want to leave yourself, you can make this piece however wide you want. If you decide that you want to cover the whole inside with this paper, then make it the width you know, make it wide enough to cover your inside covers. It doesn't matter. It can be as wide as you want. I just left a little bit, okay? Does that make sense? I hope so. All right, so basically, we're not gonna worry. This is our inside spine where we're gonna sew our signatures. We don't need this piece right now, okay? So I'm just gonna set that aside. Now, I've already scored this, and how I do this is, let me think for a sec. I attach everything this way. And for this, I would definitely use, I think for the Curious George journal, I did score tape around the edges, and then I did Fabri-Tac in the middle. But you can use any glue you want. For these purposes, I'm just going to use the double-sided tape because it's faster. I hope I am making sense. I have not done a tutorial like this before, really. So this is, you know, this is my first time. So bear with me if I'm confusing. I really hope I'm not. And like I said before, if I am, please leave me a comment and let me know, because I'll find a better way to show you. Because I think this is a really cool technique, especially when we have really pretty books that we're altering to make journals or glue books, or, you know, art journals or whatever you might be making. Sometimes the covers are so gorgeous and we just don't want to cover them up. And I haven't done this technique with little golden books yet, but I would. And, you know, I'll try to do that in the future soon. All right, so normally I would stand up and make sure that this is completely centered. So obviously, oops, don't do it the way I am, because it's probably not going to get centered at all, because I'm trying not to get in the camera. But let me think here. So this is your outside. This is your inside, okay? So we will do our best. I feel like I'm not going to get this right at all. Let me see here. Well, it's not exactly centered, but it is at least not on the crease, right? Sort of. Okay. Sorry. I didn't realize how hard that was going to be to do on camera. Okay, but as you can see, it should have been obviously more this way, but we've got plenty, you know, the crease is not covered. That's the important part. Don't cover up that crease, okay? All right. So now, this is our back cover, so let's put our front cover on first to keep it correct. Also, I kind of put it towards the top too much, but again, I think you'll get the idea. And obviously, the same as before, I would not just use double-sided tape for this step, not at all. I would actually use double-sided tape, and I would probably use art glitter glue just because I like it better and it doesn't leave a shine behind if it squishes out. But you want to make sure that this is really secure, really glued down, okay? Because it is the whole crux of your book. All right. So you just want, and I apologize if my head gets in this, you want to make sure, again, that you leave a little space. And since this one is wonky because I didn't line it up properly, it's not going to be perfect, but looks like my measurements might have been a little off too, but you just want to leave enough of a space so that it'll bend, okay, and lay flat. If you butt it right up against there, it might not lay as flat, okay? Now this one, the crease is a lot further out, so I just need to make sure I don't get on top of that. This really looks bad. I'm so sorry. I just realized how awful this looks. What a horrible way to show you. But basically, I think you're getting the idea. You don't want to cover those creases on the inside or the outside. Though it is so important because it has to be able to hinge. And this is way too far from here. Obviously, it should be centered. But do you see how we have that now? And then on the inside, you have this nice pretty part. Now, most of the time, whatever I use here on this part, I would use that same thing on this part because you want, I would want them to match. But obviously you can do whatever you want. I didn't have enough of this left to use it on that inner spine. But if you want those to match, just make sure that you use the same, either cardstock or fabric or whatever you're using for this piece, use it on your inner spine piece. And then you can do whatever you want on this one. It can be the same. For the Curious George book, I just used fabric that went with the cover. For this one, all of it was done with the gingham cardstock. So it all matched. You can do whatever you want, whatever works for you. Now I will say, since this cover I made from scratch, I didn't have to worry about it. But I hope that you will go back and look at the Curious George video if you haven't already, because when I cut that book apart, I was left with raw edges on the front and back cover, okay? And if you don't do anything, you're gonna see those raw edges. I wish I still had it here to show you. But what I did, go back and look at the video, I just put some lace around that raw edge. So I glued it a little bit here and I wrapped it around and glued it on the underside, okay? Before I put anything together, just to cover up that raw edge. And it doesn't need to be a big piece. It's only needs to be big enough for you to glue a tiny bit, wrap it, and glue it on the other side. Just to cover the raw edge. And I used lace for that particular one, but you could use anything you want. You could use fabric, you could use, you could probably use cardstock, whatever works with what you're doing. But you want to do that before you put this together, okay? So just keep that in mind. And then what you would do when you are all finished with your signatures, you would do what you normally do, however you sew in your signatures, okay? And just remember that this is the side that you want up, okay? So your signatures are gonna line up on this piece. And then when it's all sewn in, I use quite a lot of usually Fabri-Tac in the middle, but sometimes something else. And then just to keep the glue from squishing out, I put double-sided tape around the outside and then the glue in the middle. It just keeps that glue from squishing everywhere, because I like to use a lot, because again, this is the piece that is holding in your entire signature block, okay? And again, you want to make sure, and you've already left yourself plenty of space, so it's not, you don't have to be, I don't like when I have really small constriction of space and then I am off a little bit and the whole thing is ruined. So that's why I give that extra space between the inner spine and the crease, it'll stay, so that you don't have to worry too much. If it's off, if you're off a little bit, everything's still gonna sit inside, everything's still gonna close properly. You're not gonna have to throw the whole thing away and start over if you glue it a little wonky. And I say that from experience. So yeah, I hope that actually helped to show you how I do that. Like I said, the most important things are to leave this crease completely open on the front and the back, because that is your hinge, okay? And you can change up your measurements. If you don't want to leave space top and bottom, that's fine. I do that as well, because sometimes when I'm punching my holes in my papers, I might be a tad off. And if one signature sits a little higher or lower in the block because I didn't, measure properly, you're not going to see it from the outside. It's all going to be contained on the inside. I'm telling you all of my faults right now. Oh my gosh, I need to be quiet. But yeah, I think we all have the same, same sort of struggles. Nothing is ever perfect, and that's obviously not supposed to be, because it's junk journaling, right? But we all try. So I like to, give you tips and tricks that help me. And what helps me is giving myself a little more space to work with, as long as it doesn't change the overall outcome. And as long as no one can notice once it's done, then by all means, give yourself some wiggle room, because that never hurts anything. So I hope, I didn't glue that in on the inside, but I hope that helps. And like I said, make sure you like whatever paper or whatever the design is on the back of that inner part, because it's going to show a little bit, obviously a lot on this one side, because yeah, I didn't center it. But yeah, so that's that, the inside out cover. I hope you like it. Leave me a comment and let me know if this made sense for you, or if it didn't make sense for you. I want to make sure that you understand. And I will be back later today with the beginning of my, I don't know what to call it, my stash bashing series. Oh my gosh, that was goofy. I need to be quiet. All right. So I will see you later today. Bye.